Welcome to Short and to the Point, a podcast from the Comeback in Awful Announcing. Here's your host, Jessica Kleinschmidt.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Short and to the Point here on the Comeback in Awful Announcing. Jess Kleinschmidt here. An exciting episode today because despite having an NFL guest, we did talk a lot of baseball. Geoff Schwartz joins me today on the show. 8 years in the NFL playing underneath the names of Eli Manning, which obviously you're going to learn quite a bit. He's now on the media side. He hosts a podcast. Geoff Schwartz is smarter than you. You can hear him on Fox Sports Radio and, of course, SiriusXM. And you can find out pretty quickly that he has not only the gift for gab, but he's curious. And what better person to have on a show who the host is the exact same way, of course, without the NFL career. But we also finished with a lot of MLB talk. We both agree baseball deserves to have Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame. And there's a lot more that we chatted about, including Tom Brady in his new role. So here's our chat. Well, Geoff is here like I promised. And before we get started, first and foremost, welcome to Short and to the Point.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And I wanted to tell you something cheesy. Okay. I manifested this, Geoff.
Okay. How did you manifest it? Let's hear it.
I manifested this because I just like watching you over the years transition from playing into like blogging about your retirement, which was so cool, to me thinking like it's such a thin line between playing to going into the media, and you did that. And I was like, him and I are going to have an amazing chat on camera one day. I just knew it was going to happen. But this was, you know, how it goes in a podcast. Like 3 podcasts ago, I have a boneyard of podcasts in my backyard. And I was like, Geoff and I he's going to be a guest on the show one day. I don't know which show, but it's going to happen. And you're here now.
It happened. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, it's going to be fun. We'll talk a lot of things.
A lot of the
baseball
things.
Too. I'm a football guy, but I pay attention to baseball.
I know. Every now and then you like one of my baseball tweets. So I'm super stoked to get into that. But first and foremost, one of my favorite things about you is you're very open and you're opinionated and you're honest. But this was before you retired and you put a microphone in front of your face. You're one of those guys in the clubhouse or the locker room that was very open and had being opinionated. Why is that important to you?
Well, I think just being honest is important, right? Like, I think it's not really having an opinion. It's just being honest about how you feel. I think people relate to it more, but it's okay to show emotion and speak, I think, freely. Now, there are certain times as a player when in the locker room, you have to make sure that, you know, there's certain things that you have to keep behind closed doors. You don't want to air dirty laundry out, right? You don't want to give away state secrets, but I think just being honest about how you feel is perfectly normal. You know, and, you know, a lot of times when, especially when I was hurt, you know, just again, saying how you feel about the injuries and how it is disappointing and how you feel like you let everyone down. I mean, I think those are things that you really want to convey. And, you know, there are certainly times to say, you know, to be the PR and say what the team wants you to say. But I think just, again, the best policy is just to be yourself and to just be as honest as possible without causing, you know, waves in the locker room.
And when it comes to injury, obviously football players are more immune to those. I'm a baseball girl. We have injury, of course. And I've talked to guys when they're on the IL. And one guy recently even said, I had like an identity crisis because I'm injured. I want to help the team. And you mentioned yourself, you don't want to let the guys down. So what goes through your mind when you're dealing with everything? This is, you know, getting ready for rehab and before even the rehab starts. So how do you kind of deal with that?
Well, I don't know how it is in baseball. I know that they do send guys like back to facilities in Arizona and Florida to do a lot of rehab stuff. And so I imagine it feels sort of the same way. But when you're hurt in football, when you're not playing, so you're basically on injured reserve, which unfortunately I was on injured reserve twice in one season. I was the first starter in NFL history to have that happen to them.
Wow, congratulations. Yeah, thank you. That's amazing.
I'm excited.
Good for you. Good for you.
You know, you're in the facility, but you're so far removed from the team, right? Mm-hmm. Like you are going to meetings. Yes, you are. But again, like, what do you what are you meeting for? I mean, I'm not playing that week, right? So the coach is not really focused on anything. Now you might be there to be able to mentally, help support some of the young players, but then they're going to practice and they're watching practice film. Like, I'm not in practice. I'm just, so you're in the training room by yourself, and the NFL is so singularly focused on winning every week because that's the only thing that makes anyone happy, right? There's 17 games a season. There'll be 18 soon, I think, but there's 17 right now, and the only thing that gets us through the week is winning. The whole building, right? It's not just the players, but the coaches, and even down to the low staff on the business side. Like, winning is the important thing. So, if you're not going to play that week, no one's talking to you. No one's focused on you. And I'm not saying we have to be coddled or whatnot, but it's a very odd feeling to be in a building while everyone's pushing in one direction and focused on one thing, and you're unfortunately doing something else because you're hurt. And that, I think, is the hardest part. And one misconception about, I think, athletes in general, and certainly there's never, always and never are two things that don't happen in sports. But for the most part, a lot of players, when they get paid, feel an obligation to honor that contract, right? Yeah. And so when you're hurt, and the Giants paid me a lot of money to play and help them win, when you're hurt and not playing, that does make you feel like shit. Now, I understand you're getting paid, and I have people, you got paid. I did get a lot of money. Yeah, I did. But I would have liked to play too, right? That was why I was there, was to play football. And, you feel this kind of weight on you, right? Like the Giants are relying on you to play, and you're not able to play. And, there's emotional toll with that as well. And then rehab is just, I basically rehabbed from August of 14 when I got hurt all the way through, basically August of 16. So I was hurt basically the entire time. Wow. When I wasn't hurt, I was focusing on ways to make sure I wasn't hurt again, or rehabbing the injury I had and prehabbing it. And it's just mentally exhausting because you go through the process, and a lot of times the wins in rehab come very slowly. It's like, okay, 3-week mark, you have a win, and you have to wait another month for a win. And then eventually it starts going faster when things speed up a little bit, when you're feeling healthier. So it's just really, it's just mentally grinding, and it's not a position that a lot of players want to be in. I know people think it's super easy. And yeah, the money's great. The luxuries that you get from playing are great, but we just want to play, man. We don't want to be hurt.
Yeah. And I think about that because obviously when you're heavily on social media, there's always the thing, he's injured, he's not playing, and we're paying him all this money. So it's nice to know at the other side, like, they're feeling just as bad. We were talking about adding games to the season, and it's so interesting because you don't add games to the season when it comes to a lot of sports. A lot of time we're taking it away. So what are your thoughts on possibility of adding more games into an NFL season?
Well, so it's happening. I mean, I don't know. It might happen next year after that. I mean, they're going to 18 games. The NFLPA is already preparing for it with that proposal to get rid of the basically offseason program. It felt like 17 was always an awkward number because it's uneven, and you have an uneven schedule. If you go to 18 games, you basically just can play. I think it ends up being everyone in your conference. Well, you don't have to do the crossover game, which is fun. I don't think they should get rid of that, but you end up, I think, being able to play everyone, in your conference at least once. So that helps with tiebreakers and whatnot. It's just going there. I mean, I think the players do a poor job of using their leverage sometimes to get what they want. I don't know if anyone really wants 18 games. Obviously, you get an extra paycheck. That'll be nice. But yeah. I keep hearing this idea that the less we practice, because practice time has been cut down severely, it's going to help our careers. And there's no evidence of that to be right. Careers are not longer. That's something that's happening in the NFL. There's no data to suggest that, the average was 3 and a third. Now it's 3.5 or 3 and 2/3, or even 4 years. It's not happening. Injury rates aren't going down now. I think concussion rates are going down because we're doing a better job of monitoring head injuries and just being smart about those things. But it's not like, again, like we have a lot of injuries being prevented. So it hasn't really done much to help us play longer, but it makes the TV partners happy. The players get one extra paycheck a year, which I know everyone will be happy about, but it doesn't really make our game all that different.
Are you envious that there's an extra paycheck that
I mean, sure, but here's the thing too. So like, let's just say you're making 10 grand a game, right?
Mhm.
Which, so are they giving you just 10 grand for the 18th game? Or are they renegotiating and we're getting an extra cut of the pie because they're adding an 18th game? The answer is we're just getting extra 10 grand, which again, no one's complaining about it. But if we're adding 18 games, I want the players to get a bigger piece of the cut, right? I don't know what the pie is now. Let's say it's 50-50. Give us 51% of the pie if we're going to add 18 games. The players never get that. We never end up getting that extra money, not an extra check, which we're going to get because CBA requires us to get paid to play. But the fact is, are we going to get above and beyond for adding an 18th game? The answer is probably no.
I wanted to talk to you about Aaron Rodgers and this tweet. You quote tweeted Awful Announcing actually talking about Aaron Rodgers skipping minicamp recently, and you said every other quarterback will double book as Aaron goes on vacation. Fans are defending him. The Jets are defending him. Saleh was defending him. Walk me through what came to that conclusion and why I tweet that out.
Well, it's funny. All I did was put out the facts, right? That 31 other quarterbacks were there. The 32nd was not. Everyone else managed to show up. He managed to double book minicamp weekend. I went back and looked, by the way, it's the same week it is every year. So the argument that he didn't know what week it was. He's a 20-year veteran. He could figure out what week minicamp is. I made no judgment on it too, by the way. That's all I said. One tweet. That's all I tweeted. It's all the comment I made. I talked about it on my podcast, but and people are like, you made such a big deal out of it. I go, I didn't make any deal out of it. Look, do I think it matters to winning and losing? Probably not. It probably means nothing. But the fact is, it's sort of another, moment, another, instance where, football's not his number one priority. And that's okay. There are plenty of players that are successful in the NFL that football is not their entire life, which by the way, I don't think it should be. I think people should have, and players should have things outside of football that they truly love, but they also show up to all the things they're supposed to be at.
Yeah.
And like that. And so when Rodgers says, I think at one point this year, I'm going to butcher the quote, but like, we need to get the BS out of the building, essentially saying like, if you're not here to win, I don't want you here. Well, then you're not here at the mandatory minicamp.
Yeah.
And I get it.
Counterproductive. Yeah.
He was there at the 9 other weeks. Great. Okay. Fantastic. But the one mandatory thing that you're supposed to be at, you happen to be on vacation. And that's it. Now, again, is it a big deal? People took my tweet as like, it's a big deal. People get way too serious on social media.
Yes.
It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's the fact is that it's another example of him just not saying one thing and doing something else. And when you call him out on that, all his fans come at you. It's so funny. Like the Jets have the longest streak of not making the playoffs of the 4 professional sports leagues.
Wow.
And you'd think that like their fans would be like, oh shit, it's like another thing that doesn't really help us win a championship, but nope, defend Aaron to the end. We don't even know where he is. Have we got any, he's just on vacation, right? It's not, it's like he didn't go to a wedding or a family event or I can understand if his brother was getting married during that week. Yeah, great. You have to go.
It's also one of those things where I feel like that would be information available if he was like, oh, my brother's getting married and I'm doing this. That'd be something easily attainable.
Yeah, it'd be easily attainable. Look, again, having activities outside of football, I think is fantastic. I actually think more players should use the opportunity they get playing the NFL to be able to enrich their lives, because it's a really, it's obviously a very awesome power we have to be an NFL football player. But again, he says one thing and does something else. And that's how Soros Wall was pointing out, was everyone managed to be there and he didn't. People got really angry about it. Of course, it's social media. The best part about X right now, because there's obviously some terrible parts, is the mute conversation. I think I tweeted that out on Wednesday or Thursday. Maybe it was even Tuesday. And I was back home. My uncle came over on Saturday. It was like, man, that tweet. I go, I don't know, man. Haven't seen a second of it. No idea. Hope it's doing well. And then I looked at whatever. But here's the thing about social media too. I've spent a lot of time on it, and I argue with less people on social media. I just block people for the most part because it doesn't matter.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. You're not changing anyone's opinion on social media.
Totally.
You're not, if someone's going to be a fan, they're going to be a fan. Nothing you say is going to change their mind. You're not changing my mind. I've said what I said. I'm not changing my mind. People just want to argue. And I'm just over it. It doesn't help my job, right? I'm not saying that, no, none of my bosses have ever said like your social media hurts your job, but none have ever said like I'm hiring you because of your social media. So there's no point in letting it affect your day. There's no point in arguing with people. There's no point in having conversations. I've said what I said. I've thought it out before I said it. And what you say is not going to change my mind. So I'm giving you my thought. You can follow me or not. I don't really care, but I'm not arguing with you nonstop about it. So like the Aaron Rodgers thing, like I said what I said. I'm not taking it back. I'm just not interacting with anybody. So you can just sound off to the wind. I'm not listening. So the mute conversation or mute is fantastic.
We love having people scream into the void. And I'm glad you think about before you tweet. I need to work on that.
I've spent a lot of time on social media, unfortunately, probably too much. And like you get to the point where I just block people. Like it's just not worth it. Like
totally.
And there are times when I certainly clap back, and I've done certain things, and I will still do that every now and then. But like the people say, well, you should just mute people. No, just block them. Like if someone is going to continually tweet at you, and a lot of times it's the same people I can see that reply right away and say dumb things to me, like just remove them. Just remove them from your page. You can actually take off replies too, which I think is dumb. Just block someone and be done with it.
Yeah.
I've never once been like, oh man, I shouldn't have blocked that person. Think 0 seconds about after it's done. I've unblocked one person because I actually work with them and asked me to unblock them. I didn't know that they ran like a fan account for a team, and I argued with the fan account for like years. I ended up being right, by the way. That's one thing too on social media. Like when you're wrong, of course, people will attack you. That is what it is. When you're right, Jessica, no one ever says, hey, Schwartz, good job on that one. Never, right? It's always like, screw you, you were wrong, especially in the gambling space. But so yeah, I just block people. Like whatever. I think zero seconds about it.
Beautifully said. But when it comes to the media though, too, because especially to go from being a player to dealing with the media to now being a member of the media, what was that transition like when your relationship changed?
Well, I was only friendly with the media. I mean, there were only a couple times in my career when I felt like someone was unfairly portrayed. It was between 2015. It was at the Super Bowl in 2015. I was at Radio Row, and my brother was about to be a free agent with the Browns. And I was asked, how would I feel about playing next to my brother? And Mitch and I have always said that would not work. Just wouldn't work. Plus, Marshall Newhouse, a good buddy of mine, Marshall's making his way up in the media now as well. I like playing next to Marshall. Like I didn't want to, like my brother, like I was fun playing next to Marshall. I didn't want to disparage my brother and Marshall in an interview. So I basically said like, yeah, we wouldn't play well next to each other, which Mitch and I both acknowledge. And like, so I got 2 articles written. One was like, Geoff Schwartz hates his brother. The other one was basically like, hey, this is, again, the theme of what I said was like, I like playing next to Marshall. Yeah, I would play next to Mitch, but I'm not sure we get along. We're brothers, and it just wouldn't work out. But for the most part, the media was nice to me. And so I was nice back to them. And when you get in the media, what's the right word to use? I don't have like a ton of probably media friends I don't know what the right way to put it. Like I'm friendly with a lot of people and we have a lot of discussions, but like, I'm not out there breaking stories.
Right.
I'm not trying to like use my connections to like get inside information. A lot of times, like a lot of what I do when I give my opinions, I don't need to like to know the behind the scenes of what's happening. There are times I do reach out to people and ask, and whatnot. But like, so, it's been an easy transition. I think if you're nice to people and you respect them, then they respect you back. And so that's sort of how I've approached the media now. And I talk to a lot of people. I'm friendly with a lot of people. But I'm not in the business of like inside information. So I don't really, I'm not like deep in, I would consider like the media compared to some of other players that sort of in the breaking news sort of realm. Like there are players that do that, and that's part of what they do. That's not what I do.
Right. And well, let's talk about your retirement too, because you were not only embracing it, but you were kind of planning for it too. And that had a lot to do with the fact you're like a 1-year guy each time, but also injuries were happening. Why do you think that was different than what a lot of other guys went through as far as the retirement goes?
Yeah, look, so I grew up playing basketball and baseball. Football was my third sport, and I didn't really think I'd play football until like June and summer heading into my senior years when I started going to more camps and getting more notice. And baseball. I went to a baseball camp, and I always thought I played baseball. I went up to Stanford for baseball camp. It was wood bat, and just like got shelled. I was a pitcher, and I was like, yeah, probably not doing this. So like football has never been my identity. And so when I was, you know, going through my career and things looked like it was going to end at some point, I played on basically 4 teams in 4 years because of injuries. And I sort of was always planning the next step. And I grew up in Los Angeles, and I listened a lot to Chick Hearn call Laker games and Vin Scully do Dodger games. And we listened to a lot of sports talk radio. Sports talk radio on the West Coast sort of became popular when I was a kid. That's when it was 570, right? It became a thing out on the West Coast, and so we just listened to a lot of sports talk. Jim Rome was big in Los Angeles, back then. He's big nationally now, but so we just listened to a lot of sports talk radio. I always knew that I wanted to sort of talk about sports. Every player wants to call games. That's just unrealistic. You learn that as you get into the media a little bit more. And so when I was in New York, I really took advantage of the opportunities that I had to start doing TV and radio. And then I hired a fantastic agent, Debbie Spander, who was able to sort of really help me when I retired or when I was sort of near the end of figuring out my path. But I always knew I wanted to do it. And I just sort of used the opportunity I had in New York to start preparing for a career after football. The one thing that you are not prepared for is sort of the hierarchy of media and former players and sort of where you fit in that hierarchy. And I never won a championship. I'll never wear a gold jacket. I never was a Pro Bowler. Wasn't close to being that. I was a injured guy who played 8 seasons, and you realize you have to work your way up, just like I did in the NFL. Like you don't get the silver spoon on the first gig. And I think that took me a while to figure out. You look at some people getting hired for jobs and you're like, why don't I have that? I guess, and like you figure out over time, like, look, man, you gotta grind for it. You gotta work for it. And so it certainly is satisfying to see where I'm at now. And there's still room for a lot of growth, but you realize like you just got to do what you did in your career, right? 7th round draft pick. You just work your ass off to get where you're at. And in the media, you realize like that's what you have to do too. I started doing, 15-minute radio hits, and that turned into, doing 1 radio show a week and 2 radio shows a week. And I'm, very fortunate to do a lot of that at home. And I just didn't say no. Like I just worked odd out. I worked overnight stuff in NFL radio and ESPN radio, and you get the reps and you get the practice, and you just don't say no for 3 years. And again, my wife was super helpful in scheduling and whatnot, allowing me to do a lot of those things. I get some people can't always do that, but you just don't say no, man. You just keep, yes, I'm doing it. I'm in. And eventually you get to a point where you have some stable work.
Definitely. And you mentioned the hierarchy of media, and it's so interesting because you can sense when a person retires, like obviously Tom Brady's the most recent one. What, at your stage of your career, did you notice the hierarchy? Was there specific interaction with somebody or somebody you saw on TV and you thought, oh, well, that makes sense because they have a Super Bowl win, what have you?
No, it actually started when I got in the media. I actually had a buddy who was at NBC Sports. I don't know where he's at now. I met him in New York when I was with the Giants. He's a Giants fan. He was like one of the people that hired at NBC Sports. He told me like, look, man, here's the honest truth. Like, I can't put you on a major program that's at the Super Bowl because you didn't play in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
That's the truth of it. I'm like, I get the logic of that. I think I would do well in the telecast, but I get it. So I understand some of the logic behind that, right? Like Tom Brady, and I think he's going to be good, by the way, but he can talk about things I can't talk about. Mm-hmm. I didn't win a Super Bowl. I don't know what that feels like. I don't know what going to Super Bowl feels like. I don't know what preparing a Super Bowl feels like. I don't know what, so there are things that some of these players can talk about. Now I can theorize on what it feels like. I can know because someone has told me, my brother's told me he won a Super Bowl. But I can't talk about my experience in those moments. It doesn't mean you can't broadcast, but I understand the point of like, we're going to hire someone that can specifically talk about these instances. So I think I realized probably, 2 or 3 years into the media that, every time someone retired, basically, that like
Yeah.
was a little bit ahead of me as a player, I'm like, oh, well, there goes a little bit, some work for me. Which
Yeah.
again, I've come to understand that. And look, it's hard, right? Because everyone wants to move up in every business, right? And you have to understand that people are not always hired for merit. There's other reasons people are hired. And one thing too that's really difficult that I've learned to come to grips with is, you see people hired for jobs. I'm sure you feel the same way. You're like, I don't get that. But then you realize, like, I'm not up for that job.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a job for me. I'm not up for that job. Like, yeah, I don't really understand why that person got hired. I'm being a little bit of a haterade, but like, I'm actually not up for that job though. So I can't be that upset because that's not a job I'm getting. And I'm not a job I'm even applying for. It's not a job my agent's called about. And so like, I can't be upset that person quote unquote, jumped ahead of me and may not be better than me at the job, but I'm not even up for that job. So why am I angry that they're getting that job? Right. I think that's like, so that's like something that I've had to learn in the media too, is like, hey man, like, yeah, I'm not even eligible for that job. So why am I upset that person jumped me for that job?
Yeah, no, you're preaching to the choir. You mentioned Brady, and obviously the obvious stuff is he knows what championships are like and everything leading up to it. What would you love to pick his mind about? Because say, for instance, there was a booth and you were one of the analysts next to him. You know how to toss to a guy. What was something you would want to learn from him?
I think it would be fun during a game to sort of understand what he's looking at in the defense. Romo did a little bit of this, but I think it's sort of faded out now, where like if Brady's up there, right, he's so smart. And I'd love for him just to explain, like, okay, the quarterback saw this, so he did this, right? The quarterback did this, saw this, so he did that. He reacted to this. I think those are things that I want to learn from Brady, because I think the goal of every telecast, and this is what I try to do for especially offensive line plays, to make someone smarter, right? They leave the broadcast saying, oh man, I learned something about football. Greg Olsen does a great job of that. That's why he's one of the best in his early career of calling games. Like, you leave a game going like, oh shit, I learned something from Greg. How great is that? And so I think for Brady, like, he has intimate knowledge of all these things. He did it for so many years. I want to learn what he sees on the field. I want to learn. I think, I watched a little bit of the UFL broadcast. I watched most of the second half yesterday, but I caught a little bit of the first half, and I caught what Brady was talking about, sort of what one team had to do. And I thought it was good. He's like, look, they're throwing horizontally. You got to get vertically down the field, like little things like that. Like, what is he seeing as far as schematically has to change? And so that's what I want to hear from him. I think he'll deliver. I think he's going to be good. I don't think Brady goes into anything thinking, being bad at it.
Right.
I certainly don't think Fox would remove Greg Olsen for someone who's not ready for that job.
Agreed. And it's interesting you brought up the defense, because I heard one of your interviews. You were talking about the media aspect of it all. And this kind of stems back to college. You're an offensive guy, but when Chip Kelly was there, you would watch defensive tape.
Yeah.
And that's super interesting. So elaborate on that for me, because that kind of bit the bug for you for the media aspect of it all.
Yeah. Well, I had an offensive line coach that was really good at teaching us scheme, right? And so when we were in practice, we would go. So it was Chip Kelly's first year, so we're going super fast in practice, or tempos. That was what he was known for a long time early in his Orkin career. And when you do that at practice, the defense, the scout team, right, can't line up fast enough. There's just no way, because the way it works typically is, there's a coach, he holds up cards and shows the play and what the defense is supposed to do. Well, if we're lining up and snapping the ball, there's just no time to do that. So defense just lines up in base and we just go. And so I had to, so we couldn't watch practice film essentially. And so my offensive line coach taught us about defense. So we watched basically, instead of watching us at practice, we watched the opposing team's defense and just learned very detailed aspects of how defense functions, where safeties are going to go, where linebackers are going to fit, things like that. And I think it really helped in my career as a young player. And now I think it helps in my broadcasting, because I'm able to identify things on a field that a lot of linemen don't see. The best ones do. Like I promise you, when Jason Kelsey is talking about football, he's talking about the same things I'm talking about. He understands the defenses, but I think a lot of guys don't have that from an offensive line perspective. They're very focused on just what's happening in their front four, maybe at linebacker level. But I had that base about what's happening on the back end, and then just trying to learn that. Like that's the thing that I'm trying to learn most often is just kind of defense, right? Like how coverages work, because again, as offensive lineman, I know the offensive line, the running back, the tight ends, basically the box, right? So what's in front of me. So the safeties, the linebackers, and the defensive linemen. I don't know routes. I don't know route concepts. Now, you learn them over time, you study more. So I'm just trying to learn now, what safeties and corners and what coverage responsibilities they have in certain coverages, how offenses can attack those certain things. And so you can always learn, man. That's the thing about sports. Like you see something new every day, and there's things that, you watch baseball every day. There's, the other day, wasn't an A's infielder trying to make a play and just got trucked by one of the opposing,
you say Kikuchi and Tyler Soderstrom.
I've never seen that before. I've never seen
it's never been done before. It's because the A's are the only stadium that doesn't have the railing. Yeah.
Correct. But things like that, you're like, never seen that before. I saw a thing today, another clip of a high school baseball game where it was a bases loaded walk to end the game, and the runner just didn't go to first base. The batter did, and they cost him the game. The umpire ruled him out. So you see things in football every week. I'm like, I've never seen that before. And so I think being curious and continuing to learn is very helpful for my job, because in the end, look, I do a lot of different things, right? I do the gambling stuff, I do the radio, I do the offensive line stuff on social media. If you stop learning about football, it'll pass you up pretty fast, because there's new schemes and new things happening. And so being able to continue to learn and be curious is very important to me.
I agree. And I wish everybody could have been my eyes when I saw Soderstrom sitting on the ground, because I was on the call, or I was doing my in-game hit. I just look up and I see this happen, and Soderstrom's just and it was just the sad little teddy bear in Peter Pan, just hunched over. It was the most sad thing, weirdest thing that ever happened. But Kikuchi gave us some really good quotes on that. When talking about the misconceptions of an offensive lineman, you said everybody blames y'all for everything. Yeah. So to elaborate on that a little bit more, and how early on in your career did you realize everybody's going to just blame us for literally everything?
I don't know if I realized it during my career, to be honest with you, because social media wasn't a big part of that until the end of my career. And you learn as an offensive lineman too, you just take the blame for everything. You're just it's my fault. Social media just makes it far worse, because people will just go to your social media and just say mean things to you and get, and trash you and make things more your fault when it's not. And so when I first retired, or when I was first out of the league in 2016, I noticed that a lot of people are uninformed about the offensive line. It was my number one. I'm like, what are we talking about? What are we doing? And so basically I started my media career on the writing side, because I wanted to talk about offensive line and try to teach people the position, because a lot of things that people talk about that are negative about our position are not our fault. Sacks are not always our fault. Okay. The sacks we're learning, and this is one thing that analytics has really helped, is their quarterback number. It's a quarterback stat. Now, of course, if you get beat right away, that's your fault, and that's very well acknowledged. But there are a lot of times it's the quarterback's fault. And we can't say that in the media. We can't be like, oh, it's Patrick Mahomes' fault, I got sacked. No. It's my fault. I messed up. And there's certainly responsibility that takes place in getting beat at any point during a rep. But there are times when it's not our fault. We also work as a unit, right? And when we run block, there are times the running back has to make us right. I think people look at a run play and think the back can just no, he has to go exactly where the run play is designed. And if we block it that way, that's where the ball should go. There are times when we mess it up and the back makes us look good, and there are times that we make the back look good. But a run play has a certain design of where the back is supposed to go. And if he runs to the wrong place, that's on him. In the meeting room, they say it, that's on you, buddy. Sorry. But in the media, it's our fault, right? We didn't block, we didn't do this right. And so I just try to provide a little perspective to people that yes, a lot is our fault, but some of it is not. And so being honest about whose issue it is, how can we fix it? is, I think, an important part of what I do when I talk about offensive line play.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's important too, because yes, you wouldn't admit that you're at fault, but it's not always the case. And I'm leaving learning something, Geoff. You're so right. I wanted to talk to you about these awesome words you talked about with Eli Manning, and you were comparing him to Pat Mahomes, not necessarily in the way that they played, but just the way they conducted themselves and had the ability of their own teammates to feel invincible. So what's it like playing with a guy like Eli?
Oh man. So like it's just they're always right. If that's like I remember in 2015 I played 11 games that year with Eli, and you realize they're just never wrong about what's going to happen in front of you. I remember specifically we're playing Buffalo. It's the only time all year I kind of questioned what he had us do, and we're in my head. I did what I was told to do.
Of course,
but I'm in my stance, and he tells us to go to, I think it was to the left, and I'm looking and like, again, I've studied defense. I'm like, I don't. All right, sure. It doesn't look. I think that everyone's coming to the right, and he was right, of course. The last time I ever thought in my head, like, I don't know if Eli's right on this one, and it's so empowering, right? And then I think the biggest thing about having a Patrick Mahomes or Eli Manning is the confidence it gives your entire team that player can make things right. So, when you are playing on a team that doesn't have that at quarterback, there's a feel at every position, especially on defense, that we have to do more than our job to win the football game, right? Like if you're a defense that has a poor offense, you have to pitch a shutout, which is really hard to do. You can't allow points. And you see sometimes that a lot of those teams, right, to the end of the season, their defense just crumbles because the weight of that, the emotional pressure and having to be perfect really takes a toll on a defense. It really does. It's a little easier on offense to cover for a bad defense. But nonetheless, going back to quarterbacks. And so when you have that quarterback, it allows you to play a little more free. It allows you to take a little more risk. It allows you to understand like, hey, if I'm wrong, my quarterback will make me right. And the confidence of that, I think, just makes your team play a little more free, a little more emotional, a little more, you have a way more fun. And Mahomes, like last year, right? Like things were not perfect for the Chiefs, but you had 15, you can always win. When I was with the Giants, things weren't always perfect, but we had 10. We had Eli. We knew at any point at the end of a game, we had the ball, Eli was going to win it for us. And not every team has that. I've played on teams that don't have that. And it's really soul crushing to sort of know if you get down 10 points, like the game is over.
Yeah.
And you have to be perfect and play perfect. And it's just really hard to be perfect anytime.
Was there an awareness with him that he understood that there was, I don't want to say pressure, but there was responsibility on him knowing that you guys saw him in this light?
Well, look, I played with him after he won his 2 Super Bowls, so I think there was just a quiet confidence that he knew that he was that guy essentially. He won the 2 Super Bowls, like there's like the confidence that goes with that. And I think that is something that he always could sort of rely on, was that like look, most of the team that I was there, like we didn't win a Super Bowl with him, but we always knew that Eli was that guy, and again, that the confidence that gives your team is just it's really special.
And you guys are recently talking about Mahomes on the podcast and using the term GOAT, which is thrown around a lot. Yeah. But you obviously were talking about Tom Brady in the same breath and this dynasty that Mahomes had. Are we throwing around the GOAT term too much? And do you have an opinion on not just talking about the GOAT or who the actual GOAT is?
I hate these debates so much. It's probably why I'm not on these shows sometimes. Right. I can't do the hot take stuff. I met with my agent recently. And
that actually kind of shocks me.
The hot take stuff, I can't. The yelling back and forth. I want to have first things first is like the perfect show for me. Like that would be great, right? Like those guys respectfully talk about sports. Yeah, they get after it. They argue. They have different opinions, but there's respect level between those guys. I can't be in a show when we're just like yelling back and forth just to make noise. I just can't do it. I have kids that do that. I'll pass on doing that on television. And so it's difficult to kind of see myself ever in that role. I even forgot what you asked me because I was talking about. I thought about all those shows now that I just can't.
Now you're just upset. The goat debate.
Oh, the goat stuff. Oh yeah. So okay. So part of this. Okay. So like, I the thing what we do in the media and fans do, and I'm certainly a fan of sports, is we can't appreciate something unless we label it something, right? Like we can't say like Mahomes is this and that, and he's this good without saying he's the GOAT.
Yeah.
We always have to put a label on something, right? And that always frustrates me because, I think you can say that Tom Brady's the best quarterback to ever play, but you can also, I think, make the argument, and some people will, like Dan Marino might have been the most talented quarterback to ever play, right? The way he can throw the football. But Patrick Mahomes has all of those things at once. And he's never going to win 7 Super Bowls. I'm sorry, Chiefs fans. I don't think he's going to win 7 Super Bowls. 3 obviously is great. Maybe he wins 4 this year, and I think there's a little bit of a roster retool on offense. But like we can appreciate Patrick Mahomes for how good he is without trying to compare him to Tom Brady. I mean, I think they're both different type of players too. Obviously, Mahomes, his arm talent is, again, one of the best of all time. His ability to move in the pocket. He's always faster than the guy chasing him, which is a remarkable trait. He's never like you time running a 40. He's not going to break any records, but he runs by everyone else. When guys try to tackle him, he's always running past them. It's pretty incredible. That wasn't Tom Brady's team. And early in Tom Brady's career, they won by defense. This last year, Chiefs obviously won more of a defensive style than Mahomes' first couple of Super Bowls. But Mahomes is incredible, man. Like the stuff he does in the field, you don't find players being able to do that. And you look at like the clutch factor, right? Like in these big moments, how he plays. And the Chiefs did something last year that I just didn't think was possible, which was basically, and the NFL is so hard to do this, where you just show up for the postseason. Other sports, we've certainly seen that happen, right? Whether basketball certainly has happened, right? Where teams sort of coast and then the postseason happens and they turn into a different team. Baseball's a little more difficult, I think, to do that, but especially with the way it's happening with the 1 seeds getting knocked off every year, it's certainly possible for, teams sort of lower in the lower, wildcard teams to make those deep runs in the postseason. Football, it's almost never that way, where you just sort of coast through the regular season, you figure it out in the postseason. Now, they figured it out about week 16 and week 15, 16. But what they did last season has really never been done before, where you just sort of coast and then just show for the postseason. And they have the hardest postseason of any Super Bowl champion. They beat 2 1 seeds, a 2 seed on the road, and a 6 seed, obviously. And it makes it's Mahomes, man. Like the defense was great last year, but again, they go back to what we said about Eli. The confidence of playing with that guy makes everyone play a little more free. And we don't have to compare him to the best of all time. Like we can agree that LeBron and Jordan are both the best at what they do without saying one or the other was the best of all time. Like I think it's so silly that we boil down arguments to that.
I'm right there with you. I think of this scenario like you're just trying to watch the game and there's always that guy on his like 4th beer who's like, you just say, oh, he's an incredible quarterback. And you see the eye and he's about to be like the GOAT. And then he wants to just debate with you. And then that's how these shows are born. Anyways, I want to talk to you about gambling because you're introducing betting into your coverage. What's that been like?
It's been a journey, it's been an experience. I was lucky to catch on with Action Network when they first started in 2018 and kind of learn the ins and outs of sports wagering. And understand that, I'm one of the only former players that actually talks about it, right? Like knows what they're doing. There are a lot of former players that, that have deals with companies and just say things about wagering that don't actually know what's happening. But like, it's a different avenue for an ex-athlete to follow. And I kind of have dove right into it, man. It makes watching sports much different experience, makes covering sports different experience. But in the end, this is what I tell this to every boss that asks me about gambling and why they should hire me and whatnot. It's like, to me, it's about entertainment first, not gambling first. A lot of people, when they gamble, it's not that deep for them. The people that it's deep for them, they have their own thing happening. They don't need my advice. They have their spreadsheets. They have their ways they're doing. Like, they're not listening to Geoff Schwartz for advice. The people that are listening to me are fans that sort of just like to throw some money on games, right? And they don't want to be bogged down with trends and numbers and stats and all this. They want to hear about the game and then here a pick, and here's why, And so for me, when I talk about football and gambling combined, if I'm talking for a minute about a game, like 55 seconds of that is the game and 5 is gambling. Like I think to me it's about being entertaining, talking about football, and then adding the gambling to that process. And I've learned that over the years that I think that's the way that sort of it should be covered. If you certainly want to nerd out on gambling, there's certain resources for that. But again, the people that are doing this quote unquote for a living or like they have their own system. They're not listening to me for advice on how they have their own computer. So they don't need me. So to me, it's about being entertaining first, and then talking about the gambling, intertwined with talking about the sport. So that's the way I approach it. And again, I've done it now since 2018, really, and I like it. And I do gamble. So like everything I talk about on my podcast and whatnot, I actually gamble. I mean, we're recording this on a Monday during Euros and Copa's coming up. Like I got soccer wagers. How about this? I haven't added up. And by the way, I track every wager I make on good advice for people on
you have a spreadsheet dedicated?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know like by the month. So I know exactly like up, down, whatnot. We got legal sports wagering in North Carolina on March 11th. So before that, I bet like little amounts, and I've increased it significantly then. So I have like a running count of money, where I'm at. I have made 3 baseball wagers every day. Okay, 3 baseball wagers every day. I fade the White Sox, the Marlins, and the Rockies on the run line every day.
Well, yeah, that sounds accurate.
The Rockies, though, have cost me some money. I got some back. This Pirates series was good for me. The White Sox have made a lot of money, and the Marlins, the Nationals actually probably made me a lot of money this past weekend. But like, I don't know, but I write everything down. I go cross sport, man. I got this past weekend. I had PGA Tour, I had Euro, I had baseball, I had College World Series, I had a CFL wager, I had a UFL wager, UFL future. I didn't do WMA this weekend. No, I did. I had one WMA wager yesterday that my buddy put me on. So like I took the Oilers. I have a lot of different things, but I track all of them.
Yeah.
I made 135 wagers this month. I'm looking this up right now. So yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. That's how many I've done. Might be a lot for some. I don't know.
But also, like the way you approach it makes it more entertaining too. I know you mentioned the entertainment factor, or less intimidating too, as opposed to, because like we've all dabbled with fantasy sports, and I'm not just talking about like playing with my dad in a fantasy football league. I'm talking DFS and all this other stuff. It can be very intimidating, and you see the guys that are hardos and go for it. So it's kind of nice to come in as an approach of it being less intimidating.
Yeah, gambling, I think, is just not covered correctly by a lot of the media. It's funny. There's these stories that come out of athletes gambling, right? And for the most part, it's been pretty harmless. The Porter incident was pretty bad. If you're taking your,
we just had to suspend one of our guys for it. Michael Kelly.
Oh yeah. And most of that has been harmless. Even the Pirates guy that they got, lifetime suspension, like he wasn't fixing games. He wasn't throwing games. The Porter one is bad, right? Where he was purposely, basically sitting out after he started to lower his. But the thing about it is that the more it's become legal, the more we're catching these things, right? Like we're actually doing a better job of finding the Porters, right? Porter could have done this for years without anyone knowing, because there was no regulatory agency. There was no one checking these prop wagers. And so all of it is harmless, but man, people come, the hypocrisy of the NFL for having FanDuel and draft. And I say to these people, like, those leagues also have beer sponsors, right? Do we hold them accountable if a player gets a DUI? No. Right. Do we do that? Do we how dare the NFL? No, like they're adults. You can choose to drink. You can choose to gamble. There are vices, certainly. Gambling's an addiction. Alcohol is an addiction. If you have those, go. Hopefully, you can seek help. But I don't get why people cover it that way. Like it's the league's fault that players gamble. Why? Why is it the league's fault that people?
Well, it's no different than you have to blame somebody, right?
Well, certainly, or just it's blame the person.
Yeah, no, I know, but you have
like
to blame
athletes,
somebody who's not them.
We know we can't gamble on sports. We know the rules. If you do it, that's your fault. Yeah, there might be a FanDuel ad. Like, oh, so you're going to be influenced that much because there's a FanDuel ad on the TVs. You watch a basketball game, you're going to you have to gamble.
Yeah.
I think I do not know why people put the burden. Also, like it's sort of the same thing I've argued about. Like people put the burden on the NFL to punish players for things off the field when they do not put that same burden on law enforcement to do their job. Like it's like the NFL is like, you must punish the player. I'm like, what about law enforcement? What about their job? That's their actual job. It's not the NFL's job to punish players. They might do it and they might be part of it, but same with baseball. On the DV stuff. Now they've been better about it, right? They've had harsher punishments, but people get so angry at the sport for not punishing the players more. It's like that's law enforcement's job to do that, not baseball's job. And so it's sort of the same thing, right? Like it's personal responsibility for the players to not gamble. They know they shouldn't gamble. There's rules. You know this. And being in a clubhouse, there's a huge freaking sign that says don't gamble. We know we can't gamble. If you do it and get caught, it's your fault, not the league's fault.
Yeah, no, I agree.
How big is that sign in the locker room? It's like this big, right? Like it's at least like 3 feet tall, 3 feet wide. At least it used to be.
It's pretty big.
Yeah.
And I'm way closer to the ground than a lot of the guys are, but I can see it. I can see it.
Just don't gamble don't gamble on sports while you're playing. It ain't that hard. I didn't gamble on sports while I played. Just don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And especially with all the recent stuff coming out, I think it's going to be kind of an epidemic too. I think it's more stuff's going to come out.
But like people have been wagering on sports before it became legal. And we act like it's the first time it's happened. And the Tim Donaghy stuff was really bad. The Porter stuff I don't like, right? A player throwing there's the story about the other major umpire that might have been gambling in sports, but they say he didn't influence games. Like a lot of it is just harmless. Now you shouldn't do it. And I agree with sports leagues outlawing gambling because the integrity of the game is hugely important, right? Fans want the games to have the integrity that the players are trying hard. They're trying to win. They're not doing things that they shouldn't be doing. So I'm with the punishments that are handed out for sports wagering. But a lot of it is pretty harmless. It's not actually a thing that affects the outcome of games. And we act like the players are single-handedly throwing every game when they're wagering on something that's happening in a different game that same night. Yeah.
And I get where you're coming from. I can't get into it, but
you don't have
when it came down to the suspensions, it was interesting to go down the road of kind of what was going on. Not to mention the fact that there was so much evidence that these guys were participating in it. And so, yeah.
And they all lose too. Like they all just are terrible losers. Like it's like
I felt like, they showed like how much they bet and how much they didn't win. It was kind of like, that's kind of adding.
It's hard. No one wins. It's hard.
So I don't do it because I'm well, A, I can't, but B, it's just never. And I was raised in Reno, Nevada, where all we did was gamble and bet on sports like my friends did. So I just didn't get into it. I just was like, whatever. And it makes me feel like I'm smelling like smoke. So like this was back before we could do anything on our phones to bet on sports. We had to go into the casino and bet first thing in the morning. And which was kind of fun. Like all the guys I would date would love to bet on sports. It's like a fun little thing. We do that and we go to brunch. It was great. And then, but later on when it became more digital, it just wasn't as fun for me, but I still smell like the smoke of the casino when we go in and place money on sports. That was back when it was whatever. But now that I'm involved so much, it's a different situation. But speaking of baseball, I know you have a love for it. You thought you were going to play college baseball. You mentioned kind of trying out or going to Stanford and all that. Tell me about your baseball background.
So I thought I'd play baseball. That's like what as a kid, I always have loved baseball. I grew up a Giants fan in Los Angeles because my dad is from the Bay Area, and we went to
where in the Bay Area is he from?
Santa Rosa.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. So I grew up a Giants fan in Los Angeles. I think that actually hardened me as a baseball fan because all my friends were Dodger fans.
I was going to say that's intense, man.
And they're all, and look, I mean, Dodger fans don't like to admit this, but I was born in 1986. The Dodgers won in 88. I was 2. I don't really remember that one. They've won a third of a championship since then. Like, that's it. So they keep, this thing, we won a championship in 2000. Well, you played a third of a season. It's not a real championship. Giants have won 3, by the way, during that time. I like to point out to Dodger fans. They don't like that. So I just liked, I was good at baseball. I liked playing baseball. And, you got to high school and I was playing, again, I started playing football as a freshman in high school, but I was on JV, played one play that year. And I, go from football season to basketball season to baseball season. And I had a pitching coach sort of through that time. I would throw in the weekends, and I was really good as a junior, as a pitcher. ERA 1-ish. I mean, we didn't do whip. We didn't do that stuff back then, but I was probably around 1. I mean, I was good. And then that summer, I mentioned I went to Stanford baseball camp, and look, I'm 6'6". I was probably 315 in high school. Like, I should be throwing 99, right? But I put all these sports. I didn't focus on like throwing fast. It'd be different now. Now, like all as a youth, you try to throw as fast as possible. Back then, it was like Greg Maddux, right? You're trying to like find the corners and those strikes, and now obviously everyone's throw as hard as they can. And so I just didn't throw hard enough. I just didn't. I got to Stanford baseball camp. I'm sitting mid-80s, just get freaking lit up. I mean, this dude, I remember a dude, there was some guy showed me wood bats. I mean, he hit it off the wall against me. And I was like, holy shit, I'm in a bad place. This ain't gonna happen. But I pitched my senior year in high school anyways. And then you like this story. So as the older you get, you sort of figure out, like, okay, I could probably push the limits of throwing a little bit harder here. So I went to Oregon, and we didn't have a baseball team back then. We have a baseball team now. And the trade-off was like, come to Oregon. If you want to live out your baseball life, your career, one more weekend, you can do so. So they have a college collegiate wood bat league team, the Corvallis Knights. We're the Aloha Knights back then. Pretty good team. You go look them up. They've won championships and a lot of players in the big leagues, whatnot. So I got to do that in like late June before reporting to Oregon in July. So I go up to play, and I show up, and the first game they put me in. Okay, it's 6-6. We're at home, so top of the ninth, 6-6. I come in. I threw 88 to about 90, 91. Like, so I'm like gassing up. I'm one inning. I'm like super pumped. First guy I get out. Second guy's a lefty. I'm a righty. I hit him with a 3-2 backdoor curveball, strike 3. Like, I'm like, holy hell, let's go. I walk the next 3 batters, then give up a double, and then get out of the inning. So I've pitched 1 inning. I've allowed 3 runs. We're down 9-6. Okay. Fans were not happy with me, but 3 walks in a row and a double, I understand.
Yeah.
We score 4 in the bottom of the 9th. So I'm 1-0 with a 27 ERA. I did not pitch the next 3 games. Then I went and continued my football career. We won the championship that year. It's a national wood bat league for the summer. It's not the Cape Cod, obviously. It's like one below that. I have a ring. I have an Aloha Knights championship ring. They gave it to me. But if you look in the record books, 2004, the stats are on the website. There's Geoff Schwartz, 1-0, 27 ERA. It's a bad day. Bad day. But that was my last time. That 3-2 curveball will just live in my. Just backdoored him, strike 3. Oh, it's beautiful.
And now when you're watching baseball, because I know like you enjoy it.
Yeah.
What are things that you look for now? I mean, you're an athlete yourself. Yeah. What do you look for?
Well, first and foremost, I look to win my wagers. That's typically a lot
of
what
of
baseball
course,
I'm watching.
Naturally, yes.
Baseball I'm watching. I'll tell you what, the improvements of the game the last year have been noticeable. Like the pace of play, I think, is fantastic. When you watch a College World Series game and you watch a pro game, like, it's very noticeable. College World Series, they have a pitch clock. I think they don't really use it, but like the pickoffs and just sort of those things that the major league game doesn't have as much anymore, right? 2 per batter. The timeouts are limited. The baseball just it plays faster, man. Like, it's better. My kids, I have young kids. We live in Charlotte, the Charlotte Knights, the White Sox AAA team. Also, by the way, just as bad as the big league team. I take my kids to games. We don't go for the Knights. We just go and my kids are about hour and a half, 2 hours. That's about their limit of like, let's leave baseball. We've eaten all the food we can. I'm ready to leave. That used to be like 4 innings.
Yeah.
Maybe. It's like 7 now. You get like a full game. You get you feel like you've at least the money you paid for the seats is worth it when you get to watch 7 innings of baseball. We get, the 7th inning stretch. Like it's just a better and faster paced game. I don't, the shifts have not really led to more hits, have they? Like getting rid of the shift?
I don't think there's enough data to prove it, but there's also still shifting. It's still there. It's just not as Joey Gallo-ish.
Correct. Yeah. He's like standing right behind second base. He can, it's, and so, I like watching baseball. I've always liked it. I prefer like 3-2 games. Maybe that's the Giants fan in me, that's basically how we spent 3 championship years, winning games 3-2. Those games take it 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's fantastic. I just like so much about like the intricacies of ball. I think it's so funny too. The managers like still wear uniforms. Like they still wear uniforms. Just like getting ejected from games, just the way the way the baseball operates to me is, and still this age is so funny to me that managers run out and just get tossed from games. I mean, like NFL coaches say mean things to officials too. Like it ain't nice all the time, and no one's like, "You're out of here, buddy." It's so funny to me. Also, too, I umpired high school baseball while I was in college. A buddy of mine, our left guard Josh Shirkey, he knew an umpire named Adam Dowdy, who I think he's umpired, was big leagues for a little bit, but done a bunch of College World Series and whatnot. And so he sort of got me into umpiring, and so I umpired high school baseball. I will absolutely umpire again when my kids like go to college. Like that's how I will spend my springs. I will absolutely do it again. I've my son's in Little League. My daughter plays softball. The umpiring is like at a level where I'm like, I get it. Like, they're getting paid $30 a game. One of the umpires is 74 years old. He tries his best. My kids are like, you should umpire now. Like my son like wants me to go umpire Little League baseball now. I'm a little pretentious about it. I don't know if I could do like 9-10-year-olds. I might have in our Little League, the 12-year-olds it's good baseball. Like those kids throw hard. They threw too many curveballs for my liking. It's a little too much at that age, but like I would do that. I would do like the 12. Like they're bringing it like 50 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour. Like they're bringing it. So I would do that. I just like baseball. I feel like I'm one of the people that baseball like needs to have as a fan. 38-year-old with kids.
You're a purist.
The blackout rules are ridiculous. That needs to go away, baseball. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I do not need the Orioles, Reds, and Nationals blacked out. The Braves I get. They're down the street, relatively speaking. Why are the Reds blacked out in Charlotte? Nationals and Orioles. Like, come on.
Yeah.
But it's good. I think the rules have helped the game, speed the game up a little bit. It's day baseball is great, man.
I'm right there with you. No, we had a 3-hour game like a couple weeks ago, and I thought I was going to die. I was like, this is too much. And then I remembered I've been covering the game for like 6 years. I don't know how I did that for as long as I did. And it's funny you mentioned the pretentious stuff because my nephew is a great pitcher. He's 8. He's playing Little League. And my brother was like, he's really struggling with hitting. Let's figure stuff out. I played baseball too, so I can help him. And I was like asking all these reportery questions and coaching questions, like, what's his pitch selection like? And Adam goes, Jess, he's 8. And I'm like, sorry, I don't know.
No, look,
most of the guys on the team are 8. What do I know? Pretty much.
There's no. I will tell my son this about pitch selection though. He's 9, going to be 10. My daughter is 7, going to be 8 pretty soon. I tell him this all the time. I said, if you do not swing at a strike, I don't feel bad for you if you strike out looking.
Yeah.
Like if the umpire calls a bad strike 3 and you have not swung at a pitch previously that was a strike, don't feel bad for you. If you strike out looking and you foul 2 pitches off or you swung and missed, I'll tell you, umpire messed up. Yeah. But if you strike out looking and you fail to swing at a pitch previously, that's your fault.
Yeah.
So that's my pitch selection talk to him. It is intense. The parenting of baseball, youth baseball, is intense.
Yeah.
I have the perspective of obviously being a professional athlete. Sometimes I want to tell the parents, like, I'm sorry, you are 5'9" and your wife is 5'4".
Yeah.
Your kid is not playing Major League Baseball. You don't have to be so hard on him. I also too, I love some of these little things I love about like the sport, like college baseball is more fun to watch lately. I just love when like a guy like gets to first base and he's like the elbow thing comes off, the wrist thing comes off, the leg thing comes. It's just like this, like the eye black everywhere. It's like it's literally like that make me laugh because it started with like Barry Bonds wearing that big old thing, and now everyone that basically was it. Like as a youth, there weren't a lot of players wearing the elbow guards, right? But Bonds he leaned over to play a little bit, and that thing was massive too.
It needed to be. He had a target on him.
yeah. But like, there were no. I mean, think about all the hitters of our youth. Like, there was no one wearing any of that stuff.
Yeah,
they rarely wore the ankle thing.
They also weren't throwing 100 plus.
Yes, that's certainly fair. And I would imagine that the ball wasn't come off the bat quite the same way. Can I ask you a question about? Sure. Okay, exit velocity of a hit, I have no interest in. Does not interest me whatsoever. Does it interest you? Like the ball's hit hard.
It does.
I could pretty much tell the ball was hit hard.
This is like kind of leaning into the female perspective. Like I can't sit there on a panel with former MLB players and say we all played together. Right. So for me, I have to use some of these numbers to define it. And a lot of people are really into it. Me personally, I'm only talking about the exit velocity if I'm broadcasting. I won't have a casual conversation with somebody saying like the exit velo. I'm right there with you. We'll talk about how hard it was hit. Yeah. But there's something sexy about seeing that number when he hits 435 foot home run.
Yeah. I was listening to the one time I thought in the last month, I remember there was a softball broadcast. They mentioned it. I had not heard about exit velo in softball yet. I thought that was interesting because I was like, oh, okay.
I wouldn't know what a good exit velo is.
But after that, I'm like, it doesn't do anything for me.
But then I think that's kind of a cool perspective too. Like if you and I were on the broadcast together and you were like making fun of me for calling out the number, I'm like, yeah, you're right. But like, it also shows that you need both. Like you need the eye test to even out the number.
I understand on a broadcast, especially if it's radio, like you mentioning the exit velocity, because that helps the listener understand how hard the ball. You can just say that ball was smoked. Yeah, I mean, sure. But that and the win probability on the screen, the win probability, like, come on. That's as clear as a screen.
I like the graph at the end of the game. If it was a good game, like
especially
I love
football.
that.
There's a good one in football where like teams just like that's kind of fun.
It matches your emotional testimony.
That's my one baseball take. It's like I could I understand exit velocity, but it doesn't do anything for me. I feel like I'm in the minority.
I'm okay without it, but you're right. It depends on if I'm on the radio and do it, that's super important. And then when I did the post-game show, if I'm on radio, I love talking about it because especially if a guy's like just known for his power and he's showing it, like it's a good defense to kind of back up the statement of what I'm bringing out. But you're right. In person, you don't need to really say it. You can just have a good conversation. So I like bringing the old school with like the eye test along with the analytics, but I don't live and die by it. So
there you go. We got our baseball talk in. I think it's the sport is making improvements, which is good.
I think it's doing really well. I'm right there with you. And I'm glad to know that because you don't work in the sport. You're a fan of it. I'm always curious about what people think.
I wish guys would. I wish there would be more emphasis on like hitting the ball. Sometimes I feel like the launch angle stuff and like there are times. So many times I'm watching.
I'm so over home runs, Geoff. I'm so over home runs.
This is like certainly a thing about gambling for the most part. But like, I'll need a big hit from someone, and they'll like the players batting 172 with 8 home runs and 20 RBIs. I'm like, yeah, I'd rather have a guy like 240 with like 2 less home runs. Like I need a base hit here. I don't need a home run.
Give me all the small ball.
I need a single. One thing I like, last baseball topic. I've talked baseball forever. I like that bunting's out of the game. Like when I see people bunt now, especially in college baseball, I'm like you're going to lose that at bat. That's a dumb thing to do. Don't bunt. It's not going to help anybody.
I get it, obviously, for situational hitting, but it does bring like a sense of a buzzkill to the game. But it's funny because I know you'll appreciate this because you played. I talked to JJ Bleday. It's our center fielder, former first rounder. He's killing the ball lately. And it's one term that we used growing up and he still uses it in his major league career. And it's home runs are mistakes. And it's something, remember our coaches would tell us that in little league, in T-ball, obviously T-ball, we weren't like hitting him over the fence, but, it's so interesting that that's still the dynamic. And it made me happy because, chicks dig the long ball. I don't care about home runs anymore. I don't care about.
Right, but that was when we were kids because baseball was trying to make a comeback after the strike. And like, that was, and I remember 98, like I remember all of them where it was when McGuire hit the home run.
I was on the Cubs and the Cardinals in those 2 years, which was cool.
I remember like where I was at a friend's house. I think couldn't watch TV at my house. I couldn't watch TV during the week. That was like a rule. And so I think I was at a friend's house watching that game. Like I remember all of it. Barry Bonds, my favorite baseball player. Like I remember that whole era, but yeah, it's certainly different now. Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame. Different discussion probably.
I was going to wear my Barry Bonds, the Hall of Famer sweatshirt, but I wore it 2 episodes ago. So
yeah, it's kind of silly. Like the Baseball Hall of Fame is a museum of baseball. And to ignore an entire, they're not ignoring the entire era. Bud Seliger's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
But we are baseball fans. There are players in the Hall of Fame that use steroids. Like, come on. Like, we know who they are. Like, get out. Like, it's pretty clear. And we just ignore that for some reason. And just because they have good personalities and they're funny. And there's one recently inducted in the Hall of Fame that got better as they got older. That doesn't happen a lot of times. I'm not going to say names. I'll get in trouble probably on social media. But like, when you're better at 36 than 26,
that's what I strive to be.
That's we're in a different industry. So I just
as a woman though, we have to get better as we get older.
The Bonds thing, like it's so silly because you talk to any part of that generation, I'm sure you have. They say Barry Bonds was the best player.
And he's the reason a lot of the players fell in love with baseball. Yes. I mean, like it's getting older and stuff. And I'm glad it's going. And I'm not saying Bonds doesn't deserve it, but I'm glad there's more guys that are more obsessed with like the Derek Jeters of the world, because that's more of my vibe as like a defensive nut. But yeah, no, it's kind of nice to know that the home run isn't as portrayed. I might throw it to you. Barry Bonds needs to be in the Hall of Fame. He's in the Pirates Hall of Fame. We're halfway there.
Put him in the Hall of Fame. We
should end on that note. Put Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame, which is exactly what I thought we'd end on a Geoff Schwartz podcast.
Perfect.
Appearance.
Let's do it. I'm always about this. He had 400 home runs and 400 stolen bases before he started using steroids, and 8 Golden Gloves and 3 MVPs. So
when he was my size, Geoff, he was a Hall of Famer. When he was your size, he was a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, both. He was Hall of Fame. He had 2 separate Hall of Fame careers, basically.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Geoff, thanks so much for stopping by. This is great.
Glad to be here.
That was Geoff Schwartz Geoff Schwartz is smarter than you. And of course, he had an 8-year NFL career doing a lot of things in the media. And one of the things I loved is when he talked about just say yes to everything. That's kind of how I got my start. It went from a few little radio hits to a weekly radio hit to now I have a full-on career in the media, which I'm very thankful for, including this amazing podcast. Please like and subscribe where you can get all your podcasts. I really appreciate all of you listening each and every week. And of course, Philip behind the scenes for taking care of everything. If you want to know more about Geoff and everything else that we're covering, check out our website at Awful Announcing and The Comeback. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Awful Announcing, as well. And we will see you next time.
Want even more short and to the point? Follow Jessica at Kleinschmidt JD and head over to thecomeback.com and awfulannouncing.com.